today. And my name is Diana Healer, and I am an educator in Los Angeles, California. I have experience teaching elementary school, high school, and now I teach college. And this is going to be applicable no matter what grade you're teaching, and is one of my favorite applications in the Adobe Cloud. So a little bit of background about me. Before I start, I do work in production as well. There's me on set during COVID with my mask. I'm a certified Adobe education leader, and I primarily specialize in film and video production, but I'm also certified in Premiere, Photoshop, After Effects, web stuff, animation, and 3D design. So if you have any questions in any of those areas, I'm happy to help as well. And I also do trainings as an Adobe teacher throughout Los Angeles. Then, as many of you know, and some of you who came in the beginning heard, I am also the Brick Apprenticeship Program Manager. So if you have any questions about that as well, please feel free to reach out. I put my contact info on the screen where you can email me directly about that. If you've applied to our program again and you missed my talk in the morning, we're almost done emailing everybody back for the first round. So I appreciate everybody's patience with that as well. I'm also the director of digital media and production at Occidental College. I know that we have some people applying to college, some people in college, some people far out of college, but I'd love to connect with you and kind of talk about our work over there and what we do. And then lastly, I run my own company called Pandium Fusion. We are a talent agency, and we also, our mission is to create pathways for more inclusion and diversity in the entertainment industry. So if you haven't yet, I'd encourage you to introduce yourself in the chat windows just so that we can see who's here, where you're coming from, kind of what you're hoping to learn. I want to tailor this, since we're a pretty small group, to specifically teachers and how you might use this in an educational setting. But if you are a creator yourself or a student, please let me know so that I can kind of address different ways that you might use this application there as well. All right, so in terms of what we are going to do today, we are going to talk about what is Adobe Character Animator. It might be an application that you've heard of before, you're not really sure what it does, you haven't clicked the link in your Creative Cloud, and we're going to do a super exciting demo inside Character Animator, where if you'd like to follow along, I'll go over how we can do that as well. And then also how this pertains to your classroom and how you might incorporate this into your lesson plans. So to start, Character Animator is included in the Adobe Cloud and it uses performance capture technology. So you all have probably heard of things like mocap. You've seen that like behind the scenes where people wear a suit with trackers. What we're actually going to use is just your computer, camera, and microphone that's already built in. So you don't have to wear anything. You don't have to put markers on yourself. All of this happens just from your webcam and from your microphone. And we'll talk about how to do that today. And then we are going to use face tracking to capture your facial data in real time. So a lot of people think like when you animate, it's going to be a long process. It's going to take a really long time. And thinking about making something that's quick and animated for your class might not be something. I know as a teacher, we're very busy, but you can just talk and move your head and become an animated puppet in the same amount of time it would take for you to just like talk and record yourself on Zoom. So today we are going to go over the free version of this. It is totally free. You do not need a Creative Cloud subscription or anything like that. And if you would like to get it, now that we have a good amount of people in the room, I'm going to drop the link into the chat window. And there's also a paid version. So I know that many of you too, as creatives, if you have Photoshop or something like that, or Premiere as part of the Adobe Creative Suite, the paid version is also included in the Adobe Creative Cloud. The big difference between those are in the paid version, you can make your own puppet from scratch. So if you have like Photoshop or Illustrator on your computer, you can actually self-design a puppet, which is what I do in some of my classes where students design puppets that represent themselves. You can also do other things like adjust the rigging of characters in the paid version, but the free version has a lot of different things that you can do kind of built right in there. So we'll talk about those today. So yes, it is completely free. It's not a free trial. There's no limits in terms of number of exports that you can do and things like that. That's always our big question of like, is it a free trial? It's not a free trial. It's a free version. So you can see everything that you're seeing on the screen is included in the starter version, and it comes with preset puppets as well. And we'll also talk about how you can see more and see more puppets. And this is really great for our students as well, just in terms of those wanting to get started with art. A lot of times, like when I teach fundamentals, there's a lot of things we have to cover in the beginning. And I think that the like payoff and excitement takes a while to get to. This is an application where it gets very exciting from the very beginning, and then we can kind of break down the different parts and talk about what we're doing. So I'm just going to dive right in, and don't worry if you are still downloading the application or anything like that. I'm just going to go over how you can use the application and go over some tips for recording. And then I would recommend after the session and also while you're not on Zoom to give it a try and try making something. It doesn't have to be long, but I think doing it right after we do a demo could be really useful because then you'll remember everything that we talked about. All right, so I'm going to go into Character Animator. I'm also going to share my sound. All right. Yes, I like how Deborah said, I'm looking for a one-person animation production. This is exactly what you can do. I work as a talent agent as well, and I have several actors that have done their voiceover reels using these characters. As you can see, there's a lot of different variety in terms of the preset characters that come in the starter version. Up here, you can see that it says I'm currently on Starter. If you have an Adobe Cloud Creative subscription, this is also how you would switch to the professional level. That allows you to do things like I mentioned in terms of rigging puppets differently, creating your own character. And I'll show you briefly what this looks like when we go in. But we're just going to stay in starter mode for the majority of our demonstration. All right, so character animator, we're going to start by picking a character. So this is where I tell my students, pick the one that you most resonate with. For those of you teaching it, the characters on here are rigged a little differently, and getting familiar with them can be helpful for your lesson plans. Like for example, the red monster has the anchor point at the bottom of the animation and kind of has a lot of squash and stretch to it. So like I'll use that to kind of demonstrate squash and stretch versus characters like Chloe, for example, are a little bit more fixed in terms of proportions, but have other things like her hair has a dangling physics modifier. So as you move, you can kind of like see how that works. And so I'll use these kind of as an example to visually show some of the things that we'll talk about, but in a more fun way than just another PowerPoint slide. So I'm going to pick Chloe to start. And you can see as it's loading, it even shows Chloe.ai. So these are all actual layered Photoshop or Illustrator files. So in the professional version, you'll actually see all the different layers that make up these puppets, and you can edit them accordingly. So one of the exercises I have with my students is they'll pick a puppet that they'd like to start with, and then we'll go into Photoshop and Illustrator, and I'll do a combination of graphic design and digital design with that as well. You can see that Chloe is actually talking as me right now without me even doing anything. And as I move my head back and forth, Chloe is also moving back and forth. And you can see that we have kind of an anchor point at her feet. And what I'm going to do is just a quick recording and get a track in there that we're going to work with in a little bit. So in order to do a clean recording, even though Chloe's kind of matching me already, I'm going to start by calibrating just my camera to my face. And so right now, if I'm looking at myself, I'm kind of looking more to the upper right. And if I look over at the screen, I'm looking right now, it looks like I'm looking to the left in camera. So what I want to do is typically I'm watching myself over here when I'm recording instead of looking at my webcam. So wherever you plan on looking for the majority of your recording, you want to look over there. so that your eye line will match. Otherwise, it will look like your eyes are kind of all over the place. And then I'm going to click this calibrate button underneath. So when I calibrate and I'm going to have my eyes where I'm looking on screen, it's going to put on, you can see now I have this outline of kind of these tracking points around my face. I know it's a little bit hard to see on Zoom, but you can see I now have the screen outline and it has mapped everything from my pupils. And I can see when I close my eyes and I blink, it's matching that. It's matching my eye trace. And that's why it was important to look in the middle section right here as I'm calibrating. And then as I move my head, it's actually moving not only my head, but like I said, my feet are anchored and it's progressively moving down my body as well. So I'm anchored at the bottom and can kind of lean back and forth. So this is what I was saying in terms of the puppets. Some of them have preset physics modifiers already attached to them. So you can see as I shake my head, I have a little bit of hair dangle action. You'll see there's like a fish that has fins that also dangles. There's a robot that has a walk cycle that you can do. What I like about Chloe too is that as I go up and down, you can see she has like a little knee bend action as well, which is kind of fun. So once I'm calibrated and my camera is tracking me and it's recording my or hearing my voice input, then I'm just going to click record face and voice. What's also very cool is you can import a recorded speech. So if you did this method, you would basically just select an audio track and the computer, based on your mouth sounds, for those of us with who teach animation. So we have 12 basic mouth sounds and shapes like sh, that our mouth moves. And based on those sounds that it's hearing, it's going to change out the layer of mouth that we see here. And it's going to automate that process for you, which is very cool. I'm going to do mine in real time. So I'm going to do the record face and voice option so that you can see just how easy it is to make a very cool animated video. So I'm going to click it and we'll get a countdown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brick Summit. My name is Diana Keeler. I am so excited to be here with all of you today, and we are currently learning Adobe Character Animator. And that's it. So if I was playing it back right now without doing anything else, I could export this video just as is. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brick Summit. My name is Diana Keeler. I am so excited to be here with all of you today, and we are currently learning Adobe Character Animator. All right, so already exciting and a video that I could definitely use, but I'm going to show you other ways that we can customize this even further. So first thing is we have an orientation button underneath the video. So right under here, you can pick square if we're putting this on like Instagram or landscape, if maybe I'm sending it to Premiere and I wanted to edit it some more. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. You can also change it to more of a vertical or portrait if you're doing like an Instagram story. And then you can also pick 4x5. And then backgrounds can also be changed. So right now I can see I'm in a park, but maybe I'm talking about the Brick Summit and maybe I wanted something that was more like I'm at home or I'm in an office. And so you can easily switch out your settings from here as well, even after you record. What I really like about the free version is our gestures over here. So these are actually animated loops that you can add onto your video and time it to have specific sections. So for example, in the beginning, I said, hello and welcome to the Brick Summit. So I might want to say hello and do a wave. So to use any of the animations after I have my standard track recording, I'm going to take them and drag them to approximately where I want to go in my animation. So if I drop this into the beginning and I come back and hit the play button. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brick Summit. My name is Diana Keeler. You can see there I'm waving kind of for an uncomfortably long time. So with these animations as well, because they are on a loop, I can take this and customize the duration just by clicking and dragging and changing how long I want that effect to play for. And you can stack effects as well. So I'm going to wave, and then I'm going to maybe point over here. And they can be slid as well around the timeline. So I'm kind of just dropping them in, and then maybe I'll adjust them later. And then maybe I'm excited, and so sending out those heart bubbles because I'm very happy all of you are here today. So playing this back and just taking a look of what we have so far. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brick Summit. My name is Diana Keeler. I am so excited to be here with all of you today, and we are currently learning Adobe Character Animator. And then so maybe at the end, because Character Animator is so fun, I might like put in a dance. And so each one of these puppets comes with a preset set of animations. So in the professional version, you can actually modify what these look like. They're done in layers and kind of frame by frame. And you can modify them, and you can also create your own. But in terms of just the starter pack, it's great because each of the different characters comes with its own original set. So we talked about the red monster, for example, and the red monster has its own personality and different buttons that you can add to that. And then, so once I'm done with this, I have my background in, I have my animation set. From here, I can export this video really easily, and I can also share it. So if I click on the quick export button, this will ask for my file name and location. And by default, it's going to be an MP4 file with an H.264 codec. And I would just click that blue part to see where I'm saving it. And we'll do brick for this one. And then when you're finished, you would click export. And that's it. We just made a very fast animation with sound and animation with a character that I picked and a background. And it's only been like 10 minutes since we opened up this application. So I use things like this a lot for recaps of the day. So we might have capture something, or we might have announcements like my students should remember to bring their hard drives to class, and I know they're going to forget. So I'll make something like this, and I made my own puppet that kind of looks like me, and I'll be like, don't forget, please make sure to bring your external hard drives to class next week. And then I'll put that on the top of my Moodle page so that as they're looking through homework assignments, everybody likes clicking on my video, and it's just a more memorable way. Great, thanks, Henry. All right, so then I also wanted to show you just what the professional version looks like, because I know a lot of you do have the Creative Cloud, or you have it at your school, because I know at Adobe we have contracts with a lot of public schools in the area, just in terms of getting this software and equipment out to your students. So if I go back to my home screen and I switch over from starter into professional, which you'll also need to do if you log in with your Adobe account, you'll open it up and it will open you in starter. And so you actually have to click on Pro to use Pro. And you'll see that the opening screen is actually very similar to what we looked at before, but we also have this new feature, and this is one of the things that I love a lot. It's a quick and easy way of making a puppet that looks like you. So just like on the previous screen, we can start with different styles, but we can also customize these further. You can see that I have different hair. I can pick my hair color. I can pick different accessories that I might want to wear, skin color, eyebrows, etc. And then you can also see a preview of the different gestures that you can do down here. So maybe I'll do something like change my shirt color, and I might change the background, something like that. And then once you're done, I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this one Diana, and I'm going to click generate. All right, so it looks similar to what we had before, but on this one, we're going to be able to do things like change it so that we're only recording lip sync at a time, or we might only be doing eye gaze at a time. Some of my students have a hard time reading a script and then also trying to like blink and move their head. So you can do it in layers and kind of toggle what your focus is for that recording layer. Down here, you'll notice also a little different in terms of we can add multiple tracks in here. So I can add more than one puppet at a time. I know that some of you are like thinking about maybe I can make my own animated show. You absolutely can. We have some students in my class have 2 characters and they kind of like talk back and forth and have that like wide shot, close up on one, close up on the other, and they make little cartoons for YouTube on that. And then you can also export this with a transparent background with the paid version and then send it to something like Premiere or After Effects to put in additional layers. In terms of the rig, so this is new only for the Creative Cloud version. Inside here, you can actually see how the puppet is composed together. And so if I look at my puppet, I can see inside here, I have my right arm, my right shoulder, for example, and that actually is taking in input from the camera. And so some of these puppets are fully rigged, where in the paid version, it's not just your head, eyes, and mouth that's being tracked, but rather you can stand in a full pose and it will record your whole body. So we're not going to do that on today's session just because we don't have enough time. But if you are a Creative Cloud user and you do have the application, check that out because it will input your arm movements and your leg movements as well. One of the ones that I like doing a lot with something like that is this frog. You can actually like squat and jump around as a frog. I do that with my niece and nephew when they come to visit. And so if I come back to rig, this is also where you could do things like adjust the points for these. So for example, if I'm looking at my right arm and I have different layers in here in terms of like, where is my elbow? If I click on any of the points in here, I can adjust them and move them to match my artwork a little bit more closely. I can also move what camera input it's taking it in from. So right now, this is over here on the right-hand side, my camera input map. And so it's looking specifically for those points on your body in your webcam. And if you're doing a full body capture, it's actually going to put dots and you can see digital dots as you stand up and take a look. And then from here, because I marked this as my elbow and I've connected it to this piece of my artwork, as the input happens from my camera, it's going to look for that dot and then move this one accordingly. So it's very cool where you don't actually have to wear any motion capture software or anything like that. And it takes in all this information for you. What's also cool about this rig is if I click on the puppet itself, it will show you where that gathered media is. So like the first one we were doing was an Illustrator file. This one I can see right here is a Photoshop file. And if I click on that, that's going to open up the application and take me to edit that puppet. All right, last fun thing that I want to show all of you is if I switch back to my starter mode. So again, totally free. And you have a lot of puppets in here as well, but you have even more. And so people also design puppets and release them for use in Adobe Character Animator. So if I click on See More, that's going to pop open our starter mode. So this is the free streamlined mode. And you have all these example puppets. So one of my favorite ones that has just come out from one of my friends, Kevin, is this food pack. And so you can be like a cute little avocado or a cupcake. There's also now an emoji pack that he's designed as well. And then we've also increased our diverse range of characters. So we also wanted to make sure that there's accessible characters and characters that every student can relate to. So you can see here we have Jenna and Trevor. And then we also have some of my students, when I ask pick the one that best represents you, oftentimes it's not a human figure. It might be like a soccer ball or a baseball based on what they're interested in. And so we have animals and different styles and things like that. So to use any of these, you would download that character puppet. And then when you come back to Character Animator, you would just open up that puppet to start. So in here, you can open a project or you can import your puppet directly. And if I come over, let's switch back to Pro for a moment. If I come over to Puppet, you can also start completely from scratch. So if this is interesting to you and you're like, I want to build a puppet, There's a bunch of tutorials online in terms of how you would rig and assemble your Photoshop and Illustrator file so that as you're putting in the different layers, you're labeling them correctly, because it's going to be really important so that it matches the camera input information to have things like left hand, right hand, and to have them labeled accordingly in those files. Yeah, Connie, great question. So yes, so rather than just like making a random assorted Photoshop file and then trying to make that match, if you are creating a blank one, I'd recommend you can create a blank one from a document, like this one, for example, that just has all the layers that you need. And then typically I would do something like that, delete the artwork that's there, and then I would just draw or create something on that layer. And that way I just know my layer structure is correct. And that's also helpful for my students because we usually do this as like a 2 to 3 week project in my animation class. And it kind of cuts down the amount of time that it takes them trying to like figure out their rigging for their characters from the beginning. All right, so I also want to switch back to how we might use this in the classroom. But before we get out of this mode, does anybody have any questions or things that they want to see? All right, in case you're typing your question, I will take a look at the chat and keep that open. But I wanted to start first by talking about how I use this in my classroom and then how I've used this in previous sessions as well. So I'm going to pull this presentation back up. Yeah, Deborah, great question. So 3D characters cannot currently be inputted, but you'll notice in some of the presets, they look like they're in 3D. So we have ones that are kind of like claymation characters that have different 2D layers that incorporate like a 1/3 turn full front, 1/3 turn the other way. And it looks like they're in 3D, but what it's actually doing is just swapping out that layered file in Photoshop to show kind of a side version of the face. But it does look almost like a real 3D claymation character. Great question. So Adobe actually does provide a lot of training of the demo, so you can reach out to them directly. That's actually how I end up going to high schools and things like that. And we also work with community organizations to do that. In terms of educational resources, we have a bunch on the Adobe Education Exchange. Let me drop that link in the chat window as well. It's just edx.adobe.com. And there we've put slide decks and different project files and things like that that you can use directly in your classroom without too much modification. You're welcome to edit things, but we try to make packages where you can share it with your students in a way that is really straightforward. So we'll put together a lesson that includes like a handout, a Google slide presentation, and then kind of notes to you as the teacher about like how you would use this and like how you'd go about doing it. And then there's also teachers on there that just love this so much and have uploaded their own stuff. So we always encourage people to kind of share what they're doing and include their own resources. I'm also happy to come and talk. So if you have an organization or something like that, I know some of you have already DM'd me in the chat window, but I do a lot of these presentations because I just think it's so exciting. I was actually just at the Pasadena Public Library doing something similar for a workshop for them. So in my classroom, I use this in a lot of different ways. So as you can see, pretty fun and straightforward just as a teacher to not just post something on Moodle in text. So oftentimes I'll use something like this as like a creative recap and reminder from class, especially when we were doing class virtually and I had a 3-hour long class on Zoom, which was fun for everybody. I wasn't going to just post the whole Zoom recording and expect somebody who didn't make it to class or needed a recap of what we did to sit there and watch a 3-hour presentation. So I would do a little 10-minute thing right after class so that it's also fresh in my mind. These are the things that we had today. These are the main points. Check Moodle for these links. And like, this was something exciting that happened from class today, and kind of put that together in a quick presentation, but as an animated character. especially before I was on Zoom all the time, I hated watching recordings of myself. And so that also kind of just helped me have a more fun time putting myself online in a recorded video. I know a couple of my fellow teachers had YouTube videos of themselves just like kind of sitting there talking. And I was like, how do I make this more exciting? Because like, I don't even want to watch that of myself. And my students love it because I will mix up my character too from time to time. And they're like, were you a fish last class? I was a fish. So that's always fun on both ends. Second thing is I've done history and English reports as the character. So you can see in this image over here, this is my colleague, Greg Hodson from EdgeGain. And EdgeGain also does a lot of trainings on these. And he is Shakespeare. And so one of the lessons that we were doing was reading different Shakespeare sonnets as Shakespeare, and then having the students do kind of like a creative English writing assignment where they are talking as Shakespeare and his inspiration for creating that sonnet, which was really fun. We've also done some history reports where people have been characters from history, and we combine both history lessons and art in a way where they'll pick a character and then design that character in Photoshop or Illustrator and kind of modify it, and then come on and do a report as a character. So if it was somebody from like a war or something like that, and they were preparing, we had lots of like written work about like preparing for battle or letters back and forth. And so they would read that and put together a report and then write a story of that person in time and then talk and present as that character. And then they'll also kind of show their art and different things that they took into consideration when designing them. So it was great because it was like a multi-subject presentation. We've also done this with math and science to talk about process, because a lot of times it's so focused on just kind of getting the answer and getting the right answer. And so particularly for my math classes, I used to teach high school math. We do things like this where we talk about how you get to the solution. And instead of just like, oh, the answer is 4, they'll create a fun character and kind of talk about like what they did. And we'll do like one of these per week so that they can be a little bit more reflective about what they're doing and why they're doing it, instead of just trying to do things. And then same thing for science. And then lastly, one of the biggest things that I love about this is just how it can combine art and self-reflection. And that's something that I always find is hard to incorporate in the classroom, especially when I used to work with LAUSD. We'd have a very vigorous process of what we're trying to include in the classroom. I was actually in the classroom during No Child Left Behind, and we basically had like a binder that looked like a script that literally said teacher, colon, what the teacher says, student, and hopefully what the students are responding. And all of our funding came from just math and English. I'm sure that many of you veteran educators out there have experienced this as well. And so trying to find time for art and talking about how students are feeling and what's going on in the world, or music, like all those kind of get shoved aside. And so I do this project with my students that I've done for middle school, high school, and college, where we're trying to combine art and self-reflection, where they'll talk about their work, create a process book of their artwork, and also talk about something impactful. And so this is an example of what that might look like. And this is shared with permission from one of my students. We'll create a process book using Express. For those of you who haven't used Express before, it's kind of like Canva, but there's other things that you can do in terms of like video editing and stuff like that that you can put together. So if you're looking for the link, there's the link in the chat window. And Express allows you to create a web page like this as well. So this is an example of one of my students, Young Jay, who has a process book that details a week by week what they're doing to create. This is not related to this. I realize that's a little confusing. The one in the middle is about a process book for a film and kind of like what they did week by week in terms of their references for using color and sound. So I use that in my class to kind of detail their editing process so that it's not a lonely, isolated experience in the lab wearing headphones for 10 weeks. And then on the right, you can see this is our character animator project, where the students, instead of doing a week breakdown, do like a step-by-step breakdown of to how they did it. And so he was adding Thanos's gauntlet and kind of talked through his process about how he designed that, and then went into Character Animator. And then let me switch screens for a second. We also annually enter this Character Animator contest where my students put together a process book in a similar way and then submit a 1-minute video. And the one from 2022 was about what is your balance? And so I wanted to share my students' process book and then also show you the final video of what he made. All right. So this is an example of an Adobe Express page. And so in our class, we started with just doing some basic sketches. I always have my students kind of detail on paper and then kind of bring it in. So he started on paper, showed me some sketches, and then brought them in Photoshop and started to modify the file there. And then I always like to ask too, like, what is challenging for you? And so these are his bumps in the road and kind of the mishaps. So like, for example, one of the pupils wasn't tracking and we were trying to figure out how the camera input is not connected correctly. And so we went through the rigging process for that. And then our students will always put fun things like that, like just hello. And then now he has the puppet ready. And then the prompt was, how do you have balance in your life and what will your balance be? So this was kind of coming out of the pandemic. I mean, we're still in the pandemic, but coming out of being virtual in class and finding balance again in terms of like work, life, and school, and how do you approach that? And so here he did a bit of a mind map and jotted some notes down about what he wanted to talk about, and then made his monologue, and then created this background himself. So as you saw, there's a lot of different backgrounds and presets that you can pick from, but he drew his own. And then here we have how he layered it in Photoshop, knowing that he was going to use After Effects as well. So what's really cool is designing your character and then sending it to another application. It doesn't have to be an Adobe application. You can also send it to like DaVinci Resolve, or I saw that some of you use multiple different things in here to create media. So you can export your video with a transparent background and bring it into whatever you want. And so he knew he was going to use After Effects and started masking some things and then adding some birds, for example, which you'll see. And then I wanted to show you what the final project looks like. You can also see here he's doing some keyframing, like frame by frame animations using Adobe Animate. And then in our character animating contest, he came in 4th place, and this was an international competition. And I'm going to show you what his final 1-minute video looked like.
Coronavirus in the past 2 years changed the balance of all of our lives, but the key to finding a true balance which is sustainable isn't about being able to hold yourself in this perfect middle state. The reality is finding balance is about from one side to the other, but ultimately being able to find your way from the bad to the good and keep living onwards. It's impossible to stay in a constant state where you're just centered and pure, but if we can come away with this with a great understanding of the sways and ability to tolerate that, then we can come away as better. If each person can do that, we can help build a better world.
All right. Yes. So this is something that I always love seeing. Just it's such a wide range of people being comedic to really being reflective with their answers. And it's a good way to just connect with my students in a way that is beyond just creating something that looks good in the classroom, because they'll come in and go over their scripts with me. And oftentimes that will lead to like other conversations of like, what sparked that idea? So I've gotten to know them really well, specifically through this project. All right, ending on time. I was hoping to leave 15 minutes for questions, and it is exactly 12:45. So if anybody has any questions or wants to unmute themselves, please let me know. And I'll try to go through the chat and see if I missed anything as well. Yeah, so some of you have messaged about just community organizations and connecting. Let me put my contact information up there as well. I'm happy to also connect you if you're looking specifically to get in touch with Adobe about any of those solutions. I can connect you to our educational team there. Yeah, Matt.
And then fantastic presentation. So as an educator, when you're introducing this to students, like what type of, like, because obviously you can get into the just recording and simple stuff like that, as you get in digging down into like the rigging and things, like does this end up being like 4 weeks that you spend? I mean, I know you're at a college level and stuff like that. Is it a 4-week thing? Is it a 2-week? Like how quickly do your kids get it, or how in depth does it usually take you to get through like what you showed us?
Yeah, so we in our classes only meet once a week. So when I say 2 weeks, it's only actually 2 class periods. So for this project, we typically do it over 4 class periods. And we'll do the first one kind of introducing Character Animator, what it can be used for, and we'll do a quick demo of like start to finish importing a character using just starter mode. And then the second week, we'll have them design their character. So I'll go over why the layer order is so important. We'll talk about using either Photoshop or Illustrator. For that class, students have had prior experience doing basic designs. So in terms of like layer order and how layers work, they come into class already knowing that. But we talk about like how layer order is important specifically now for rigging, and they'll design their character. The third week, we'll talk about the camera input and voice recording. So we'll talk about how we have like a sound booth available to them and how to record in the sound booth to get really clean audio. And then we'll also talk about the camera input and then bringing their project over to make sure like that their eyes match their eye layer, their elbows match like their elbow on their character, etc. And then the fourth week, we'll go over physics. So if they have things like hair dangling, or if they wanted to anchor their feet to create some squash and stretch and things like that, we'll go over that in the fourth week. And then the following week, their projects do. Some of them also come in with prior video editing experience. So we're able to move a little bit more quickly in terms of like if they wanted to cut scenes together, like you saw Harry put in some animated backgrounds of the birds that he drew and things like that. It really varies because my students come in, some of them are seniors, some of them are first year students in terms of like their familiarity with applications, but most of them have some kind of like basic digital arts experience.
Great. And as far as like rigging, for most of them, that's the first time they've been introduced to rigging, or they could have
Yes.
come in with something else.
No, for I would say, yeah, like 95% of them. Occasionally I'll have one student that was like, oh, we did this for one day in high school. But the whole concept of even parenting and connecting like things together, I'll have everybody stand up and really think about like, can you move your hand without moving your forearm? And they'll like stop and think like, can you? And I'm like, okay, now can you move your forearm without moving your hand? And it's great because we'll have like this whole moment in class where everybody's kind of just shaking their body to see how things are connected. And that's usually how we start. And then we'll talk about like how we're then going to parent our hand to our forearm. So those are going to move together. And yeah, it's a very fun experience, but it is their first time kind of getting introduced to that topic as well.
Great. Thank you for elaborating.
Yeah, of course. Other questions? I put all my socials up here just because I use them all professionally. And so don't feel like you have to add me on every platform, but they are all there for anybody that wants to connect.